Hello, I'm Jeff Power, senior writer with RealTime Fantasy Sports. Welcome to the RealTime Fantasy Sports Show. I'm joined by Logan Glasser, contributing writer here at RealTime Fantasy Sports. We are so excited to be live here on Fantasy Alarm with the Better Sports Network, doing our first ever live stream today. Logan, so exciting, isn't it?
Absolutely. This is an awesome experience, and I'm excited to break down our Champions League draft today.
Yeah, that's what we're going to do today. We're going to break down the Champions League draft. This is a draft that we do on our site every year. We invite the best players on Real-Time Fantasy Sports. We have a top players report, and it gives us a readout of all the top players on our site. So we invite them to participate. It's a highly competitive league. Logan and I are both in the league as well, so we thought it would be fun to break down our teams, talk about all the teams in the draft as well. But it's the Champions draft, it's the best of the best, right, Logan?
For sure. Yeah, we have thousands of users on RT Sports, and all these users are ranked inside the top 50 on our player rankings, including some of the top players, including number one.
Yep, we have the number one overall player in this league, Richard Mallon. He'll let you know it too, right?
You sure will.
And his team name is RTS number one, I believe. So he's proud of that. So it's a lot of fun, this league. It's highly competitive. Every year it goes down to the wire. I feel like it's always so many teams finish around 500. It's crazy how much.
Yeah. And it's also very beneficial to look at this draft board like throughout your drafts throughout the offseason, because this is a very good tool for ADP when you go on your own personal draft. If you're doing a home league, this is an absolutely great draft board because you're getting the top players in the industry who they like.
Yeah, exactly. You're correct. It's a great tool. And that's one of the reasons this is the original reason I did this on our site. I wanted to use it in our draft guide. We have a free draft guide. If you go to freedraftguide.com, you can check it out there. But we have information here from all the participants in the league. They give you their insight on picks they like, picks they don't like. We break it down as well. I go in depth also. So that was one of the main reasons I did it. It's I feel like it's the kickoff to draft season here at Real Time Fantasy Sports. And I think it's just a great tool, like you said, to get everybody ready for their leagues because everybody's drafting right now, right, Logan?
For sure. And it's all different types of formats. So the format that we're going to go over today is Amir's are all American leagues. So that comprised of a quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a flex, tight end, kicker, and defense. So 9 total roster spots. So it's a little bit on the smaller side. But you got 12 teams in the league, 4 teams make the playoffs, 3 division winners, and then the top team in total points gets that wild card spot.
And like you said, it mirrors our All-American game, which is a great contest here at Real Time Fantasy Sports. We have all different contests, too. If you want to get in anything here at Real Time Fantasy Sports, go to rtsports.com, click on that Money League link. We have all sorts of contests this year. Our Real Time Fantasy Championship is the TFC is $500,000 grand prize this year. We have a best ball championship as well. All different price points, all different games. Drafts going off around the clock at this point here at Real Time Fantasy Sports. If you want to get in the league and start drafting, you can do it right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. We are averaging about 20 or 30 drafts a day. So definitely options to fill, including slow drafts. So if you like slow drafts to take your time, some people prefer that. Personally, I prefer slow drafts. So definitely check those out.
I think at this time of the year, slow drafts are good too. You know, kind of ease your way into it. So you don't have to, make those spur of the moment decisions that are kind of tough at this time of year when you don't know what's happening with training camp, getting ready to start, and position battles to be had as well. So I think slow drafts is a good idea. I like that, Logan.
Absolutely. And new dynasty leagues will also be opening up in this next week. So we just sold all of our orphan teams. I believe there's only 2 teams left. There are over 500 that were up for sale. 498 of those are gone. We got 2 left, and then brand new dynasty leagues will open up. So keep an eye out on that in the draft lobby.
Yeah, definitely. Those dynasty leagues are a lot of fun. It's one of the fastest growing leagues on our site, the dynasty leagues. It's a lot of fun. It's a different way to play the game.
Yeah, and you can trade picks during the draft, and then you also have those incoming rookie/free agent draft each year. So it's definitely a good way to stay involved.
Yeah, you can trade future draft picks. It's like being your own GM. It's an interesting way to play fantasy football. There's so many different ways to play these days from when we just started doing it, right? It's crazy, all the things you can do.
So many different formats.
Yep, and we offer them all here at Real Time Fantasy Sports. So let's talk about this Champions League that it took place about a week ago. And like I said, a lot of the top players are in the draft. So let's bring up that draft board and take a look at it right now. And I had the seventh pick. Unfortunately, I did not like that spot. Logan, you picked 2 picks behind me at 9. I mean, it was a lot of tough decisions I felt early on, especially for me. I took Josh Jacobs with the seventh pick, and I really struggled with that one, Logan. I had Bijan Robinson there, Cooper Kupp, Travis Kelce, Nick Chubb. I just thought it was not a great spot to be in. So it was just a really tough decision for me. Josh Jacobs, what do you feel about that? Would you have gone that route, or you would have looked at somebody else with that pick?
Personally, I probably would have gone Robinson or Cup. I think Jacobs is a fine pick there. But personally, I would like Robinson or Cup in that selection. But you can't go wrong with either of any of those three.
Yeah, my thinking with Jacobs is I thought he was the safest. I think Bijan definitely has probably the highest ceiling, but Jacobs is in a great situation with less to compete with. Cup's coming off an injury-plagued season. I like Kelsey too, worry about his age. So I went the safe route with these great drafters. Maybe I'll regret it in the end because sometimes you have to go big or go home, but that's who I ended up taking with my first pick. You took Cooper Kupp, Logan, and that was your first pick at 9. How did you feel about getting him at that spot?
Yeah, I was thrilled with Cup going at 9. Personally, I would probably take him at 5 just based off of how dominant he's been when he's been healthy in the last couple of seasons. He should be ready to go this year. And yeah, when he's healthy, he's one of the best wide receivers in the game. I would put him right up there with Justin Jefferson when he's healthy and can perform. But unlike previous years, there hasn't been really a concrete first round ADP. I mean, players are kind of jumping all around. Like if you look picks 3 through 10, they can be interchangeable. In previous years, I kind of feel like you kind of knew exactly who you were getting right when that draft order was selected. But this year, it's kind of a lot of players are pretty even.
Yeah, I feel like right now it's Jefferson, McCaffrey, and Chase. That's what I've seen. That's what went in this draft, but it's some sort of that order: 1, 2, 3. McCaffrey's first a lot, and then Jefferson, and then Chase. I feel like that's kind of the consensus early first 3 picks. But after that, I think you can make a case for a lot of different guys, and it gets tough. I think that's why it's kind of an advantage for me personally. I'd rather pick in the way in the beginning or way at the end. Like at the end of this round, Nick Chubb went 12. I think that's great value. Someone just posted that in the chat as well. So I think that's a great point with him being good value there at the end of the first round. But he has a huge ceiling, Chubb, in my opinion, having Watson from day one. So I think that's great value. But I don't know about you, Logan. I'd rather be right at the start or right at the end. What do you think about the first round?
Yeah, I agree with that. And also talking about Chubb's value, you also have Kareem Hunt that's going to be on the most likely on the move from Cleveland, looking at elsewhere. So Chubb should definitely get a lot more targets. But I kind of agree with you. I kind of like either being in the very beginning, first 2 picks for me personally, or kind of near the end. I think I ended up being fine with my spot at number 9 just because all the other options I got the player that I kind of wanted that I would have probably taken at 4 or 5.
Mhm.
So I ended up being fine with Cup falling to me. But
I
yeah,
like
like you
I
said,
Yeah, I like what you can pair at the end of the first round too. Like some of these owners, you had Chubb and Hill, C.D. Lamb, A.J. Brown. I kind of like that better than in the middle rounds. You had Saquon Barkley, Najee Harris, Austin Eckler, Amon-Ra St. Brown. I don't know if I feel quite as good about that pairing as I do the end. So that's one thing you want to look at here, in my opinion, is just the roster build itself. There's a lot of different roster builds in this league too. And I also did want to mention I did talk about some people commenting in the chat. Feel free to do that if you're watching this live. If you have any questions for us, any comments, love to hear from them. Logan and I are happy to answer them. But let's talk about some of these roster builds of these teams too. All different ways to do it. I think there's not one right way to do it. We've done the research in the past here at Real Time Fantasy Sports. You can win taking a running back first and then 2 receivers. You can win taking 3 running backs first. You can win taking 3 receivers first. So I think you can win numerous different ways. It's interesting to see how these teams stacked with their roster builds, though, in the end. Are they good enough to win it all with the way they construct their teams if they went 3 receivers first or 3 running backs first? We had two teams do 3 running backs first. So we had the 5th team took Mark Mullen took Barkley, Najee Harris, Brees Hall. Right after that, You Hate Me took Jonathan Taylor, Derrick Henry, and Jahmyr Gibbs. So those are three really good running backs. But look at the receivers. They have the first team I mentioned has DJ Moore, George Pickens, Mike Evans. Second team, Amari Cooper, Drake London, Chris Godwin. What do you think about those roster builds, Logan?
Yeah, personally, I'm fine with taking the running backs early. I think there's enough depth in the wide receiver pool to go ahead and take those later. But what really kind of surprised me was that we had 12 wide receivers taken in the first 2 rounds. We had more wide receivers taken than running backs in the first 2 rounds, which you don't see that common. So stacking up those running backs, not a bad idea because I mean you're gonna get good quality in those running backs. I don't know if I would have taken. I'm a little skeptical on Brees Hall with coming back from the injury, and then also Derrick Henry. I'm also a little bit skeptical on the volume that he's going to receive with Tennessee, just based off of how that offense is going to move the ball. But I like the other running backs. I love Saquon Barkley, Jonathan Taylor, and you also got Najee and Gibbs. So I like those four compared to those other two.
Yeah, definitely. I really like the receivers. What the You Hate Me team did, despite going three straight running backs, Cooper, London, and Godwin. I think that's really good. I mean, the team before that had T.J. Hawkinson, so he did not even go receiver in round 4, which was kind of surprising. So I think he has some questions at receiver, but the team after him, I thought, really did a good job. Three straight receivers after three straight running backs. I mean, that's a pretty solid build.
I think London's one of my favorite value plays in this draft. He went 5.6 overall. So I really think that, and he can be an elite talent. I think he's going to have a great sophomore season.
Yeah, definitely. Let's talk about some of our decisions we had to make. So I went ahead and took Garrett Wilson in the second round. Then I went Miles Sanders, Deebo Samuel, James Conner, Christian Kirk. So I kind of went, well, I went every other running back receiver. I went every other pick for the first 6 rounds. I just kind of felt like that was the way it played out for my team. It wasn't really a strategy involved with that, just kind of seeing how it fell to me. I think it's kind of hard to formulate a set strategy when you're picking in the middle like I was, but I'm pretty happy with my receivers. Garrett Wilson, Deebo Samuel, I think is good value as well in round 4. He's really fallen. This was a second round talent last year. Didn't have quite the season as expected. I think a lot depends on Brock Purdy, but overall, I think I'm pretty happy with my 3 running backs, 3 receivers. Logan, what's your thoughts on my 3 running backs and receivers? Any
I like it. I
beefs?
mean, yeah, what you were talking about with Deebo, he was going in the second round last year. He's an elite talent. He had an okay season. It wasn't great. It wasn't terrible though. But San Francisco just has so many good talents now. You got Kittle back healthy, and then bring in Christian McCaffrey, and also Ayuk has kind of been breaking out as a star wide receiver. So just going to be if he can get enough touches for Deebo Samuel. But overall, it's a very good build of a roster going back and forth between wide receivers and running backs. Waited a little bit on tight ends, but then stacked a double tight end right there. Also one of the last teams to kind of get a quarterback, which is very surprising for it being in round 7. Who would have thought round 7 you would be one of the last ones getting a quarterback? I believe we had 10 quarterbacks taken in the first 7 rounds, but Dak Prescott, he could be a top 5 quarterback easily.
That was one of the big surprises of this draft. I know normally past history suggests that these champs league participants wait on a QB a lot, but not in this one. They went early. You had 3 go in the 3rd round and then 1 in the 4th, but then you had 3 more go in the 5th. So that's 7 QBs off the board after 5 rounds. I mean, that's a lot of quarterbacks going early in this league, and it normally doesn't happen. I went with Prescott in round 7. I'm fine with that. I wanted to get another one to pair with him sooner than later because I didn't want to miss out on a solid backup. And I took Daniel Jones in round 7. That's one of my biggest regret picks, though, because you see Geno Smith, Jared Goff going round 13, even Kirk Cousins in round 13 as well. If I would have known I could have waited that long and got Geno Smith in round, if I would have went around earlier and got him around 12, I would have felt a lot better about my roster build. But that's one of my big regrets there. I kind of feel like I panicked and took Jones earlier than I should have. What do you say with that?
It's easy to look back on it and look and say, what if I did this? But when you're in the moment and you see all those quarterbacks going off the board, you kind of have to make sure that you get a guy that you want as your quarterback number 2.
Yeah, let's talk about your build now. I went over my first 6 picks, Logan. Your first 6, you went a different route. You kind of filled out your starting lineup for the most part. You took Kupp, then Tony Pollard, Josh Allen, Kenneth Walker, Javonte Williams, and then Kyle Pitts. So you went Cup first, and then you really waited on receiver because you got your anchor number one. You went 3 running backs, and then Josh Allen and Kyle Pitts. So you kind of have all your skill positions filled for the most part, besides that wide receiver too. Are you happy with the way that turned out?
Yeah, and the reason why I kinda did this is based off of the roster build for the starting lineup. So if our roster sizes are pretty small, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a flex tight end. So I wanna really fill up those skill positions. If it was a bigger roster size, such as 3 wide receivers, 2 flex, even if it was like a super flex league, there's more roster spots for skilled positions, then I would have done my draft a little bit differently. But with that small roster size, I wanna get elite players at those positions, such as Josh Allen and Kyle Pitts. So that's why I kind of went early on that QB tight end. I have a little bit of a risk in running back with Javonte Williams coming back from his injury. I might not be ready at the start of the season. It's kind of wait and see. Also, a little bit of a risk on Kenneth Walker. I'm not a huge fan of him with them drafting Zach Charbonnet, but the offense is going to move the ball very well. And going in round 4, there was just too much value to pass up. And then also to start my first draft with Cup and Pollard, I really like both of those picks. Both players can have very strong seasons. And my wide receivers after round 7, I really like Marquise Brown, Addison, Rondell Moore. Those are kind of 3 wide receivers that will kind of be going back and forth in my wide receiver 2/flex role. And I think all of them have good upside. Marquise Brown is going to be Arizona's number 1. And then you also get Rondell Moore, who's going to be their number 2. And when Moore was healthy last year, he dominated. He put up some monster points. And you also have Jordan Addison, who's going to be stepping into Adam Thielen's role in Minnesota with him gone, and probably one of the highest volume passing offenses in the league.
Yeah, I think your wide receiver number 2, you have some very capable options. I just hope you don't run into trouble figuring out which ones to start each week. That would be my
For sure.
one
That's
concern.
the
That's
hard
always
thing about being a
yep,
GM with it.
it is. It's the fun part of fantasy football, though, trying
It
to figure
is.
that out. It's also the frustrating part.
Until they score 30 on your bench, and then you start a guy
Exactly.
that got injured in the first quarter.
True statement. Let's look at some of the roster builds now. We talked about our teams after 6 rounds, some other ones. Are there any that stand out? Do you think, wow, they did a great job in these first few rounds of stacking their
Yeah, one
lineup?
of my
Anybody
favorite
you really
teams,
like?
Bubbles Army. They started off with Christian McCaffrey, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith, Dobbins, and Fields. Team number 2. So they had a very good start to the draft. Can't go wrong with getting McCaffrey, and then they followed up with 2 dynamic wide receivers in Waddle and Smith. I really think Devontae Smith is going to have a good season. Also, Dobbins had actually a very good ending to last year once he got kind of fully healthy from his ACL injury from 2 years ago. And then you also got Fields going in round 5, who could be one of the highest scoring quarterbacks on the board when the offense is moving.
Now, Brad Petrie, Bubbles Army, he's a longtime user of our site. He won a big contest last year, correct? Do you remember which one it was?
I believe I do not know exactly. It wasn't the TFC. It could have been, I believe it was either RTFFC.
I think you're right. One of the RTFFCs he won, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
He does a great job. He's been in this league a lot of years too. I really like his build too. I'm going back to the You Hate Me team. I think he did a great job in the middle of the draft to get the talent he did. 3 really good running backs, 3 really good receivers, and that's just the early rounds. Then he has 2 tight ends. I know I just talked about the first 6 rounds. I said to look at those, but just looking down his roster, he has 2 tight ends he can platoon in Evan Ingram, David Njoku, and then his quarterbacks too, Deshaun Watson, who has risk, but a huge ceiling. And then he got Geno Smith in round 13, though, who I think could end up being a better starter of those 2 quarterbacks. So I really like his build, You Hate Me team. I think he did a great job. Great job.
Yeah, those middle wide receiver picks really helped that team right there through rounds 4 through 6.
Definitely. I want to talk about Godwin, too. I've seen mixed feelings on him. He went to in round 6. I think in round 6, I mean, why not? I know Baker Mayfield's a huge downgrade from Tom Brady, but Godwin's been an elite receiver in this league for a long time. I mean, it's crazy to me that he falls that far.
Yeah, and what we also kind of need to think about with Godwin is if Tampa Bay's out of playoff contention, there's a chance that he gets traded. And if he goes
True.
to a high offense, he has a very high ceiling, and you would not be seeing him in round 6 if he was on a different offense with that. So if he does get traded, same with Mike Evans, to a very um, high-paced offense, then watch out for those two.
Let's talk about maybe some surprise picks in these early rounds. Some picks that kind of stood out to you. You were kind of surprised they went this early. Anything you want to mention out of these early round picks?
Yeah, it's not really an early round pick, but one of my favorite picks is Jamison Williams on Mallon's team in round 10. Coming once he gets back from that 6-game suspension, he's also going to be fully healthy compared to last year where he was dealing with that injury when he came back. But with how Detroit moves the ball, along with how weak their defense has been in the past, they play in some of those high scoring games. So lots of points are going to be put up on the board, and he's an elite talent at wide receiver. So getting him that late in round 10, definitely want to keep an eye out for. I also like Amon St. Brown, his number 2 wide receiver or second round pick with Detroit as well.
Yeah.
Another one to keep an eye out for is Chris Olave, also taken in the second round. Saints number 1. You also have Derek Carr coming in with that team. So definitely can put up some big numbers with that. So I like those couple selections.
Yeah, some surprising picks to me, kind of, not going where their ADP normally goes. Damian Harris is one that kind of stood out to me. He went with, I guess it was the last pick in round
Yeah, last
6,
pick in round 6.
and then he immediately took James Cook. So this was the owner Black 23 who had the first pick in the draft. He sewed up that Buffalo running back situation, but I think he might have been able to wait a little bit on Harris. It seemed a tad early for him. I do like Cook at that point of the draft, though. I think he has good potential to be a 3-down back and with the backs that were remaining. But I guess he just wanted to make sure he had that Buffalo backfield. It was just a tad surprising to see Harris go that early. What's your thoughts on Harris?
Yeah, I think that was very early for Harris. I'm very interested to see what Buffalo does in that backfield. Last year you didn't really see that much production out of Singletary and Cook. 2 years ago, Singletary had some monster games, but last year they kind of struggled in that backfield. What do you think about handcuffing running backs? That's definitely a big debate.
It's a huge debate, and my thoughts are I'm fine with it as long as the backup is capable of producing and you're not reaching too early. So I look at like Elijah Mitchell, great handcuff in my opinion, because he can step right in for Christian McCaffrey and do a great job. I know he's injury prone, but I love taking him in like round 10, round 9. I think if you get McCaffrey, you really have to get Mitchell, in my opinion. So maybe that's one knock on Bubbles Army team. He took McCaffrey with the second pick, was unable to get Mitchell, who went in round 9 to Suncoast team. So that's one pick that kind of I think could come back to haunt Brad if Christian McCaffrey gets injured at all. But overall, when it comes to handcuffing, I'm okay with it. I just think you have to know your handcuff and make sure they're in a situation where they can produce well. Because I think taking a chance on guys like Rashawn Johnson for Chicago went in round 11. Guy could emerge and be a starter. I might rather have him than a guy like Zach Evans who went in round 11. So when it comes to handcuffing, I think you have to know the player you're getting. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that makes complete sense from where I'm looking at it with. So I'd much rather have a guy that's going to perform when an injury does happen than just have the backup on that exact same team. Because someone like Gus Edwards, he's not going to be a dominant back. And he's not going to put up 15 plus fantasy points if Dobbins gets injured. So if I'm looking for a guy that I want, it's going to be an elite, a guy that when he gets a chance, he's going to make the most of it. So that's kind of what I'm looking. I also don't mind like a Kareem Hunt, like kind of what we talked about going in round 11, depending
Yeah.
on where he ends up, because there's going to be some injuries that happen um, in preseason. So one of those teams could definitely take a chance on Hunt, Fournette, Ezekiel Elliott, who might end up back with Dallas, but we'll see.
Let's talk about some late round picks before we get out of here on the show. Our first show here on Better Sports, being streamed on Fantasy Alarm and our channels as well here at RealTime Fantasy Sports. We're really excited about that. But I like talking about these late round picks. It's always intriguing to me. Anybody that stand out to you, are like, oh, that's a great late round pick, think they got great value there, or this is a player I'm taking a chance on late in drafts. Anybody you want to talk about there late in the draft?
Yeah, 2 wide receivers that I really like where they were going after round 12. So you got Zay Flowers and Romeo Dobbs. Zay Flowers, he goes into that offense with Baltimore, and there's not really a number 1 wide receiver in that core, especially he's coming in as a rookie. So the volume is there to be had for Flowers. It kind of depends on Lamar's action. And then for Romeo Dobbs, Christian Watson kind of took control of that wide receiver core, but he only had a couple of good games. I mean, all of his touchdowns came within a 4-game stretch last year. So the wide receiver number 1 is still, I think, wide open in Green Bay. So Dobbs definitely can win back that role.
Definitely. And I'm going to talk about a guy I picked. I don't want to brag about my picks, but I
Do
really
it.
like taking Paris
That's
Campbell
why
late.
we picked them.
Yeah, exactly. I like taking Paris Campbell late in drafts at this point with New York. There's been great talk about him maybe emerging, leading that team in targets. So I think he's a great late round gamble in drafts. I also like CJ Stroud. That was my son. So we didn't even talk about his team. My son, Henry, he produces some content on the site, and we always get him in this league as well. But he took CJ Stroud in round 15. I like that. I think he's a super smart quarterback. He's going to come in, start right away. That team could be losing games, and he could be airing it out at times. So I think that's great value. Russell Wilson, too, in round 14. I mean, why not? He was a disaster last year, but still Russell Wilson. This was a guy that's been a top 5 fantasy quarterback at times. So I think that's another pick I like late in the draft. And then Sam Laporta with Detroit Lions. He's going to be their number 1 tight end. When Jameson Williams is out early in the year, I think it's good news for Laporta. He's going to get some work. So I'm really excited about him as well. Logan, that is a recap of the Champs League. Let's talk quickly before we get out of here. Who's your favorite team besides your own and mine?
I think
Anybody?
I would lean towards Bubbles that I kind of talked about. I like Bubbles Army and also Suncoast. I think both of those teams will compete. Again, only 4 teams make the playoffs. It's going to be very tight, though. There's not much difference between the top team and worst team in this league. You're not going to see that in these top players, champs leagues. Every single team is going to be competitive.
I agree. I'm going to talk about the teams that I talked about earlier as well. I like the You Hate Me team a lot. I like the Tommy Gun team too. Even though we took Kelsey first, waited on a running back till round 3, I still think his build's really good. He has some good receiving options as his number 2 after Stephon Diggs, the number 1 tight end. So I thought he did a good job. Again, it just shows you can build so many different ways and win. So just a lot of fun doing this Champs League. I'm really excited to be on here. So Logan, thanks again for joining me. I really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun doing this. We're looking forward to doing this on a weekly basis here at Real Time Fantasy Sports. We're looking forward to getting everybody involved too. It's been great doing the show. Logan, thanks again for joining me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Jeff. I had a lot of fun.
Again, don't forget to get in all the leagues here at Real Time Fantasy Sports. Go to rtsports.com. Check out all the leagues we have on here. This has been Jeff Power for Real Time Fantasy Sports. Have a great day.
This is Logan Glasser from Real Time Fantasy Sports.